It was obviously going to be a tribute to the few, the Battle of Britain pilots and the people involved.
Don't just stand there, get one up! Roses away! In the trenches!
Everything in the script was based on a character that we either met or knew about. Sailor Milan, South African, was very much the life of Bob Shaw, who had a wife and children. Dame Felicity Peake, who turned at the end of the war, became head of the WAFs. Everything she told me about her adventures as a young WAF were represented by Susanna York.
And I think it was a very important film to make too, for people who had fought in the war, the wives of people, or the girlfriends, or even the daughters and sons of people who fought in the war, because I think it gave them a sense of history, and rightfully, you know, those pilots deserve that acknowledgement.
I have absolutely no idea why they picked me. I mean, I thought, I suppose that the edge was that knowing nothing about the Battle of Britain, apart from what the man in the street knew, having spent my time in the Navy, it was all new and fresh, and I could have a neutral viewpoint, both about the German side and the RAF, because you can get, when you get experts, they sometimes become so tied up with their knowledge that they have no sense of proportion about the whole picture. I just finished a picture, Funeral in Berlin, with Michael Caine for Harry Saltzman. And he came up to me one day and said, I've got a present for you. And I thought, oh, well, that's very nice, put it in the car. And he said, no, it's Battle of Britain. How'd you like to direct the Battle of Britain? Benny Fish was a Polish pilot in the Battle of Britain. He can tell you all about it. Go and see him. And I found Ben's enthusiasm for the project. He sold me. He gave me a lot of research material. And very quickly I said, yes, this is going to be an exciting project. It turned out to be a slightly questionable present, a poisoned present. Benny helped me to meet so many people who had partaken in the Battle of Britain, from the very top, Lord Dowding, down to armourers, all the personnel and the pilots themselves. And then gradually working up to the German side of it, where Adolf Galland, who was at the end of the war, general in charge of the Luftwaffe. So I felt well protected with all this help. The aces started to get me worried, because they said, oh, well, you see, Guy, on Wednesday the 19th, I mean, we knew that the Germans had changed their tactics. I said, you're talking rubbish. You were just sitting there waiting to scramble. You couldn't have known what the tactics were, what Dowding had changed. The Official Secrets Act was still working, and I tried to ask Lord Dowding on 2 occasions, and he was very, very elderly and in a wheelchair, how it was that he didn't make up his mind about the big wing and what have you. And of course I didn't know that he was ultra reading the German intercepts. He knew how many aeroplanes were going to fly the next day and what their targets were. So this is why he was able, to a large extent, to control his forces and deploy them to the best of the possible ability. But because of the Official Secrets Act, he couldn't tell me this. And this goes back to the pilots were saying, and of course we knew this, that, and the other thing. No, you didn't know that Dowding was reading German signals. You didn't know that either. That's the only area where the film is historically inaccurate. The first thing I obviously said to Harry Saltzman, where the hell are you going to get the airplanes from? Because we can't use any combat material from the Second World War because that's all black and white and we're making it in Technicolor. He said, well, that's all taken care of. And as you know, that was quite an effort to assemble all the planes.
There were only 6 Hurricanes in the entire world, one of which was completely rebuilt by a pilot in Canada, and he flew it all the way from Canada to England just to be in the movie. There were 1 Stuka, which you see arrive outside in Berlin. When you see the Stuka attack on Dover, those are models. Sadly, we didn't want to use models because all the flying sequences were for real. But the Stukas, they were non-existent. And you don't just start building airplanes. I mean, films cost enough as it is.
That was a big job because no Stuka existed. So the Stukas had to be radio control models and miniatures for the radar towers, but they were placed at Dover and Deal, and good work was done by the miniature department.
As far as the Hurricanes were concerned, I think there were only about 2 or 3. We had at Pinewood Studios, where the film was based, a huge construction building all these mock-up Spitfires, Hurricanes, Messerschmitts. So every time we did an attack on an airfield, we blew up the mock-ups, not the real planes. We only had about 11, 12 Spitfires that could actually take off at once. Those aircraft on a daily basis were being reserviced, rebuilt, because parts would fall to pieces, you know. And a lot of these aircraft were outside airfields on show at the entrance to the airfield. They had concrete in their tires. They hadn't been touched for 20 years. So we collected them and serviced them and put oil in them and hoped they would fly. So there was a huge risk of safety. And that's why we had to be very meticulous about every scene we did. Nothing was done from the hip, ever.
Ils sont à Sedan.
For the benefit of the uneducated among us, I shall translate.
Our chum can't believe the sedan's fallen. I can.
We either stand down or blow up. Which do you want? Cut it out.
They're close.
Höhen. Falke. Jawohl, Herr Reichsmarschall. Geben Sie mir eine Staffel Spitfire.
Casting was very easy. Harry had the idea of paying them all, every single actor, be it a star or small part, a daily rate, which would be the same for everybody, and it's a Battle of Britain and you bloody well do it. And to the man, they all said, yes, please.
You found that artists would slash their normal fee just to play these roles. Certainly people like Laurence Olivier and people like that were begging. It was just a lineup of men who wanted to play in those roles, were volunteered. Nobody chased them. They came and wanted to do the film.
So don't threaten or dictate to us until you're marching up Whitehall.
And so it became a bit of a movie as well as a film. But it didn't suffer for that.
Everybody was in awe of Laurence Olivier. He was the greatest actor. And at the time, I believe he was having the cancer treatment and goodness knows what. You would certainly not have known it. We filmed his stuff at Pinewood. And the real Lord Dowding, who he portrayed on screen, came down to visit.
We're fighting for survival. Losing. We don't need a big wing or a small wing. We need pilots. And a miracle. Good night, gentlemen.
And Olivier said, here's where I've been sitting, trying to play you, trying to portray what you did during the battle, and making a very great mess of it. And Lord Dowding says, oh, I'm quite sure you are. And it just broke everybody up.
Section Officer Harvey, I've noticed that some of your girls are now using the men's trenches during air raid practice. It's got to stop.
Sir.
And another thing, gas mask cases. They're for gas masks. They're not handbags.
Kenneth More, lovely Kenneth More, the archetypal English actor. He was in some scenes we did at Duxford with Susanna York.
God's teeth.
We blew up this enormous hangar, this huge hangar. There's a huge scene with all these sandbags in front. And they actually had Susanna, and she was with Kenny Moore, and they were running from the front of this hangar as it all happened and had to jump down into a trench in front. And this thing just blew to hell. And I thought, I wonder whether they would be allowed to do this today, because, I mean, it was really quite hairy, the whole thing. The scene is there. Robert Shaw had the most incredible presence on film, I thought. When he got the right part, when he hit it right, he was so powerful. And the way he led that squadron off, you really believed in him.
Corporal!
Sir,
Where are you taking those vultures?
officers to the west, Encho to the guard room, sir.
Like hell you are. They're responsible for all that. Get them to clear it up.
He would inspire people. He was a tiger of a man.
Never fly straight and level for more than 30 seconds in the combat area. How many times have I told you? Come on, I'll give you a lift.
I thoroughly enjoyed doing it. I really liked Guy Hamilton. I'd worked with Chris before. We sparred a bit, but we got on pretty well. There's about 4 or 5 key scenes in my career that people particularly come up and say, and one of them is they say, oh, I remember you in the Battle of Britain when you're smoking a cigarette and all your WAFs are dead along the ground.
Put that cigarette out! The mains are gone! Can't you smell gas?
And somebody comes to you and you shout, don't you!
You yell at me, Mr. Warwick!
Mr. Warwick! Or something like that.
What parts of London can we use that haven't been rebuilt and it's got skyscrapers and what have you? St Catherine's Dock is an area just the other side of Tower Bridge, and it was very, very heavily bombed by the Luftwaffe during the war and had never been rebuilt. And we just got in by the skin of our teeth before they started to knock them down. We said, look, we'll do it for you. And we were able to put firebombs and set fire to all these great, big, old dockyard things. And it was fun and fine. And we said thank you.
When we did these scenes over London, the Heinkels coming over to bomb London, I mean, that was another scary moment, because here we are with these antique planes flying now over a metropolis, a city. And I was praying that day that it would just get done, because if one of those fell out of the sky, I mean, it would have been horrendous. So it was a scary day, and it must have been really weird for the people looking up, seeing the Germans bombing London in 1968.
I was still at school. I was 10 years old, and of course was frustrated at being in the classroom when we could see in the newspapers, because I don't think we had television then, that filming was going on all over England. However, for me, one day on the way to school, I heard aircraft coming over.
Mr. Smith, I'm called Mr. Smith.
But this was a very distinctive sound, one I'd never heard before. And it turned out to be the B-25 Mitchell camera ship used by the film unit with 2 German Heinkel bombers. And they came over very low indeed, but of course we just couldn't wait to see it. And it was the talk of the class and everyone of that generation for several months.
I have to say, one of the great joys of working on the film was to meet a lot of most distinguished technical people. Freddie Young, for instance, who was one of the great cinema photographers. And he was just the most charming man and so helpful to me, and used to come up and tell me this, that and the other. And I remember he saw me trying to shoot the stuff in the harbour when all the barges were there, and he came up And of course they only had about, I don't know, 20 barges, and there were meant to be thousands of them there. He came and said, of course, old boy, you know, it is a match shot, you know. And I said, yeah, okay, thanks, Reddy. I'd sort of realised that. But he was just so helpful, and I just watching the way he worked and the way he lit things. He did a wonderful takeoff sequence with all the bombing raids, and he just shot it straight into the sun and then had about 40 brute lamps blazing back against the sun. And then he stopped the whole thing down, and it was just the knowledge that he had and the technique he had and the knowledge that when things were reprinted, this would come out and that would come out.
It seemed to me that taking a documentary approach and trying to get as near to the truth as we could, no problems on the British side, why not apply the same principles on the German side? Adolf Galland was enormously helpful, obviously, with putting me in touch with all the German aspect and the tactics that had to be engaged.
The German pilots gained their experience in Spain, in the Spanish Civil War. And you very quickly learned the German tactics. And we copied them, the fighters, because they knew what they were doing. We didn't. So we learned from them. And they were very good.
But I did have a falling out with Adolf because he was always slightly insistent that there was no such thing as Nazis in the Luftwaffe, which I thought was pushing it a bit. And Galland says they would never give the Nazi salute. I said, you know, you're joking. You weren't even there. I mean, let's start from that. I bet you that if Goering was yelling at something and they pulled away, I bet you they would have... and so whether he did or didn't became an issue, and I never saw Galland from then on.
We just got on with making the movie and knew it was an important movie and knew that Harry Saltzman had really put his head in the noose with a film that was a huge scale and a huge undertaking and a huge commitment on his part, because once he started, he couldn't stop. And there was a lot of careers at risk with this film.
And if you consider that this film was budgeted at like $17 million, it was huge, absolutely huge. And it was being financed by an American company who suddenly realized that they weren't even in the war when the Battle of Britain was fought, and that the American public would not know what the heck it was all about. So I should think that Harry was very pressured at the top for the money that he was being given by United Artists.
It's a lovely film. It's a wonderful film, and I know at the premiere a lot of the guys, there were a number of wet eyes at the end of the premiere, and a lot of the Fighter Association, who I've become very close with in recent years, the members, stood up and applauded at the end. As far as I'm concerned, if that's what they think of the film, then it served its purpose at the time.
Even my own family, I mean, I learnt that my mother's brother, Leslie, he was a pilot, he flew Spitfires, and he was in the Battle of Britain. He was 20. He trained for 9 months in Canada to fly Spitfires. He went out on a sortie one day and never came back. He got lost in the Channel. You can't imagine 20-year-old boys flying these airplanes. It's unbelievable. And just shooting at each other. Just shooting at each other just seems like ridiculous.
And I still can't believe that young men of that age got in those things and fought a war. And then, having fought that war, which was all over in an hour, came back, had a cup of tea, and went up and did it again.